To get you caught up on this project, last time we built all of the cabinets in this custom closet, and the first video was all about the demo. So if you want to go check those out, go give them a watch. In this one, I'm going to be showing you all about doing the closet rods and this jig that I came up with to come up with the holders for those rods and quite a few other things. I bought 3/4 inch galvanized pipe. That is an internal diameter, so the outside is actually slightly larger than an inch. Because of that, I could not use a 1-inch Forstner bit to make the supports for this. I tried it, didn't quite fit, so I went with 1 1/8, and here's my test board. It fits in there just a little bit of room, so I think that's gonna work great. We have 10 of these brackets to make in total for the closet hanging rods, so I decided to make up some jigs. This one, I have marked, this material is 4-inch, which is what our material is going to be that we use on the sides that will support the shelves or the tops, just right where the pole is gonna hang. So I've marked center on that. So once we cut our piece to length, we'll pull from the back end halfway out where the closet rod needs to go. Wherever that mark is, I'll line up the halfway mark on my jig and just drill it quick enough to make a mark. And then I can remove the jig and drill all the way through, and the drill will follow it. Then on the other end, it will not be an encapsulated hole. So on one end, we will set this in there like that. On the other end, we'll have to have a way to kind of tilt it in there. This is the basic idea, using the same hole, but a slot. So it will slot into the other side like this. And that should work fine. If we need to remove it later, we can just pull this out, pull it out of the other hole, and replace it. I've got my 16-inch piece here, so now I can measure from whatever the back end is. I'm gonna use the piece of plywood that looks the worst. Joke's on me, it all looks bad. I bought the cheap stuff. Okay, that's the worst. So we'll measure from the back forward. We'll put a mark at 12. I'll just do it on the top here and on the bottom, since our jig has it on both. That may help us align it, keep it square. The idea is this is the same thickness as our material. So to line it up, you just flush these two sides, and you would just, do it like this. Apparently I need to strike that line all the way through. We're making this up as we go. Now we can do it. That looks good to me. So then we would just drill that. But before we do that, I'm going to put a little detail on this corner here. I'm thinking I'm just going to cut it back at about a 30-degree angle, and it'll just make it look nicer when you're viewing it. It'll just have a little bit of a detail on the edge. I will mark 2 inches down from the top. Then we'll cut our angle like this at 30 degrees. Whoops. I accidentally went past the line that I marked, but that's okay as long as I make all of the others the exact same. Far enough. Okay, so then we'll cut all of this. The jigsaw can be a pretty imprecise tool. Just go slow, take your time, and make this cut as clean as possible. Then you can just clean it up with a rasp or something afterwards. Pretty good. Look good to you?
Yeah, that's great.
Here's how you put it into practice. I have measured from the back end 12 inches forward, which is halfway in our cabinet space. That's where the hanging pole needs to go. And I'm going to use the jig, use my fingers to just center it, and line the center line up on the jig with my mark there. Once I get it steady, I can use the drill bit in the round part here to just mark a hole. And now I can drill this spacer board here. There's my hole. For the opposite side, I can use the same jig, but I'm going to be tracing this slot so that they're basically the same on every board. Again, just line it up with my fingertips here and put that center line where it needs to be. I've got a mark here on the edge that I'm lining up, and then I can just mark this hole. I'll actually drill it first, but I want the straight pieces. And I can mark this hole, which I've already done right there before I created the other one. You can see that divot. Now I can drill that out and then cut it with a jigsaw. Whoops, that's the rough side. While I've got this process set up, I'm just gonna make a bunch more. We need 8 more of these for the other parts of the cabinet, so I'm just gonna keep going with that right now. I'll probably do a time lapse or something, and then we can start installing. It's time to cut all of the closet rod so I can get it in the actual sections in the closet. I bought a really long piece of just galvanized pipe from a local supplier, and I'm cutting it up into pieces. That was the most economical way that I could find to do it. You could do this a couple different ways. You could use a grinder like this with a cutoff wheel, and you could also use a jigsaw and a couple other methods. Actually, I think I've cut some of this pipe before using a metal cutting blade in my Sawzall, but pick whichever one you're most comfortable with and go with that. I can't get a tape measure down inside these bracket holes, so another easy way is to get a couple scrap pieces of wood and stick them in there, and then you're able to measure exactly how much you can pull out of here. Then just pull it out and measure this, and you're good to go. If I can get this to cooperate. 32 5/8. All right, simple.
And now to demonstrate the world's dullest hacksaw. That was the one and only I did with that hacksaw blade. I didn't have any more blades, but I just wanted to show you that it could be done pretty easily with a minimal tool. Since we're currently living in this house while I'm doing this renovation, I kind of have to do little projects and pieces of it as I can fit into our schedule. So that's why I'm skipping around a little bit, and you can see this is already painted.
Next, I'm going to rip a bunch of the hardwood edge banding. I'm doing 1/4 inch on the edge of all of this plywood because it will make painting much easier. I'll just secure that with some 23 gauge headless pins. And that way I'll just have to fill a few of those pin nail holes instead of trying to fill the edge of the plywood. Edge of plywood does not look great if you don't do a lot of like wood filler or joint compound or something like that. So this is really gonna save a lot of time. I have cut a few different widths of maple that I had just left over from the bed building project. So I've cut these slightly wider so that I can flush trim them off. That's what I'm gonna try at first and see how it goes. I've got some wider ones for this double section. That one's a little bit different right here. That's almost perfect. I thought rather than hitting them just perfect, I would try using the trim router with the flush cut bit just to see if that goes faster. I'll then have to chisel the edges out with a chisel because this will leave something around, but I don't think that'll be very hard. I'm gonna try it and see how that goes. I may adjust as we get into this. I brought both of these saws up here. This is a little flush cut saw that does a pretty good job for small stuff. And this one if I need something a little heavier duty. So I'm gonna attempt this and see how it goes, and then I'll adjust for the rest of it. To attach it, I'm gonna use some glue and this 23 gauge headless pin nailer that will hold it just enough that the glue can harden.
What I typically like to do is start at one end. Here I'm starting at the bottom, so I'm not really fighting gravity. And as I'm working my way up, I'm just correcting for any little bit of curve in my face frame board by lining it up with my hands and nailing as I go. And you can get a pretty straight line by doing it this way.
I'm just making sure on this one to flush it up with the inside here, so all I have to trim is the outside. No need to do the work on both sides. So now that will be a lot easier to patch these few holes when it comes time to paint. There's really nothing about the maple that is sacred or good. Maple is a decent paint grade wood. I happen to have some that I got at a good cost is why I'm using this, and it's left over from another project. A lot of people for face frames or edge banding will use poplar. That would work just as well. If you don't know, firing at a slight angle in opposite directions sometimes will hold material a little bit better, especially with these pins that don't really have a head on them.
You can mark these and cut them with a handsaw like this. Obviously, it will go a little slower and your accuracy will depend on how good you are with using that saw. I happen to have a mobile miter saw that's just good for trim and this type stuff, so I brought it upstairs and I used that. That definitely was not faster doing it with the router and flush trimming it. It was just more trouble than it was worth, so it was worth me taking a little bit more time and setting up to make sure my edge banding was the exact thickness of all of the single plywood. Where I had these double ones, obviously I had to change that a little bit for a few of the pieces, but it worked out a lot better and a lot faster to just go ahead and rip all of it at the exact thickness. Some of you probably already knew that and were yelling, "I told you so." There was still an occasional board here and there that needed trimming, and I just took care of that with the router. I wanted to explain something really quickly. All of this stuff is paint grade, so you think you can cover up a lot of stuff with caulking the corners and any gaps and this and that, yes. But you also have to be careful of any height differences or that kind of thing that can cast shadow lines. So here's an example. When I planned to make this, I wanted this to be completely flush with the base I built. With the wall being off here and there, it's just not. So the 1/4 inch that I did is slightly overhanging, and I don't know if you can see this, but it's kind of making a shadow line right there. But the problem is on some spots, like right here, it's flush because this, I guess the grid that I did kind of following the wall was not quite as straight as I thought. So you don't want it flush in some spots and then a shadow line in other spots. That looks like a mistake because it is. In order to hide the mistake, I considered taking, for the part that I had already added this, just adding another 1/4 inch piece like this. And then it would have a deliberate shadow line to where it looked like it was on purpose. And I just showed that to my wife and she didn't love that idea. So the other idea is to sand this hardwood piece back to be flush with this, and your eye is not going to be able to discern between the two. So I'll do that, and then going forward, I'll probably just have to do the same thing. And it's a little bit more sanding, but I just wanted to point out those kind of small details that you don't want to get to the end and think that the paint's going to cover it, and it won't. It was a whole lot more of the same for the rest of the faces of the cabinets. I tried to find a fine balance between using scrap and not being wasteful and not having too many seams. So I wanted as large a pieces as possible, but then again, I didn't need a bunch of 12 to 14 inch pieces left over, so I did use some of those also. This is part of that skipping ahead stuff that I was talking about. As you can see, there's already paint on these cabinets. That's because this is a much later step. I will definitely be covering paint and all of that in a future video. It just couldn't quite fit into this one. I wasn't very happy with the amount of play that was still left in the bars with these holders that I made. I wanted a little less of a chance of that bar being able to slip side to side and kind of fall out. I don't think it really would have happened because it would constantly have weight on it with hangers in a downward motion, but I just wanted to be sure. So I added some extra little plates that I painted so that they looked nice and blended right in, and that way this bar actually can't come out at all. Hey, thanks for building with me. I really appreciate you watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you haven't already, go back and check out some of the other videos in this series. See you next time.